Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And today we have someone who I guess epitomizes the reason for this podcast, really, because he's someone who I have kind of admired from afar and really enjoyed all of his work, but has absolutely no idea about his story behind the scenes or what he did before or anything like that. And so a perfect guest to have on today. And so we have Jose Picardo joining us today, which will be great. We've had a chat offline, and so welcome to the podcast.
Very pleasure to be here. I'm so delighted that you invited me, Chris. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, we were joking offline that we thought we'd do something a bit risky today, and then I joked that it may be something that we kind of have as a standing item now in the kind of introduction for the podcast, because I was looking through obviously all of Jose's stuff online, and I noticed that obviously now when you Google people, you can get an AI kind of insight into them. Yeah. And so as fun, I'm gonna read out what Google thinks Jose is and has done, and then we'll ask him whether or not any of it's particularly accurate. So here we go. Jose Picardo is an experienced educational leader, consultant, and author, specializing in digital strategy and school leadership. He is the founder and principal consultant of Azimuth Partners Limited, an educational consultancy he launched in April 2025.
Correct.
To support schools and trusts. Okay, we're good so far with digital transformation. All right, let's have a look. Professional profile. It says he has held several senior leadership roles at prominent UK independent schools. Is that true?
That is true, yeah.
Amazing.
Deputy head. The definition of prominent, but yes.
That's true, I suppose, yeah. Deputy head at Embley in Hampshire, and assistant principal at Surbiton
High School, yeah.
Happy days. Yeah. All right, we're going so far. He's authored several books on educational technology, including Using Technology in the Classroom and Educate One-to-One.
Co-author on that one,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, this is well done to kind of Google. Accolades. He's the recipient of the Pearson National Teaching Award for outstanding use of technology in education.
Yeah.
What year was that?
2014, I believe.
Oh, nice. Okay. All right. Well done, Google. That's great. Oh, here we go. Outside of his professional life, he is an amateur photographer and a bass and guitar player.
Yeah. All of which I do very badly.
Amazing. Oh, well, I was hoping there'd be something really kind of controversial in there, but they seem to have done a good job.
Yeah, they're all right, actually. I think AI has come a long way from making stuff up completely, isn't it?
So. Hilarious. Well, tell us a bit about kind of your current role then, what maybe a typical week looks like.
Oh, well. I left my job as deputy head in an independent school called Embley last April. I set up my own consultancy. And for the first few months, it's been a question of just establishing myself and reading a lot, finding out a lot about different schools, what schools' priorities are. So my day-to-day will involve reading. I do a lot of reading. I'm also doing an ILM coaching and mentoring certification, so that takes up some of the time as well. So some of the reading is related to coaching, executive coaching, which I believe you have as well, haven't you? You are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's and then my days involve visiting schools, carrying out audits, doing a little bit of training, and just in December, I was in Amsterdam with Apple, onboarding as an Apple professional learning specialist. So I now got another hat where I go to schools and schools who go down the Apple route. I go and train them. But my main work is schools who need a fractional digital strategist. So somebody typically is a school that acknowledges that the digital strategy needs attention, but they haven't got quite the resources to employ somebody full time to look at it. So I come in on a fractional basis, and I work with them. Typically long-term partnerships rather than one-offs.
Amazing.
So typically my clients are MATs, multi-academy trusts, or groups of independent schools.
Right. Wicked. And then take us way, way back. So, where did you grow up and what subject did you teach and all that sort of stuff?
Wow. Well, I was born in San Fernando, which is in the province of Cadiz, in southern Spain. So I was born there and was there up until the age of 19, I believe.
Okay.
When I was doing my A-levels, like in English schools, you have language assistants who come in from France, from Spain, or wherever. We had the same. We had an English assistant who came.
Okay.
And I was doing English for my A-levels. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has to do English. Well, I had to do English at that point. I don't know these days. And then a kind of sliding doors moment happened when I was a prefect and I was attending a prefect meeting in the boardroom. And the language assistant had arrived from England and was walking down the corridor to the admin area to have the paperwork checked and onboarded into the school and so on. And had we not crossed paths that day,
really,
I don't think we would have been speaking today, Chris.
Wow, that is great, isn't it?
Yeah. So that and then funnily enough, after we met, she went back to the UK, started her degree, and I started my degree in Cadiz. And 2 years into my degree, our relationship was ongoing. And, she used to come on holidays. I used to come and visit her. She used to come and visit me. And then she said, why don't you apply to come to finish your degree in the UK? And to be honest with you, I said to her, I said yes, but mainly because she was insisting and I didn't want, and I was hoping to get that out of my hair. Okay, I'll do this for you because you're just insisting. And I got a call from UWE, the University of the West of England, and said, well, you can, we'll take you on. There was one drawback is that I had to start the degree from scratch. So by this point, I was in year 2 of my degree in Spain.
Wow.
And, love makes you do crazy things. So I said yes.
Yeah.
So I started my degree from scratch. And I've been in the UK ever since. So that means that I often reflect about this, and I left Spain when I was 19-ish. I've only whenever I've been back to Spain, it's been to see my family and on holiday. I've been living in the UK consistently ever since. Obviously, it makes me a foreigner in this country, but when I go back to Spain, I feel like a foreigner there too, because
of course you do.
I've been away so long.
Amazing.
So that's a little bit about me. I went into logistics after my degree. We might come back to that later. And then, 2 years in, I decided that logistics wasn't for me. That I always, I realized that I always wanted to go into teaching. And I think the government at that point was offering bursaries for PGCs. They needed languages teachers. So I thought, this is my chance.
Perfect.
So I gave up my job in logistics, went to do a PGCE, and as they say, the rest is history.
And did the love continue? Did that?
We got married. We had 2 children.
Great.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not together anymore, but we have a very good relationship. And
that's good news.
Yeah. So, life. We might come back to that later as well.
Of course. Yeah.
Life has its way of throwing grit in the coals.
It certainly does. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great introduction.
Spanners in the work, I think.
Spanners in the works. Yeah. What is spanner in Spanish?
Good question. What is a spanner in una llave inglesa? An English key. Yeah.
An English key.
An English key. Una llave inglesa. Yeah.
There you go, people. You've learned something else today.
There you go.
Well, let's get started with the kind of the questions and stuff. So people that are new to the podcast, we have a kind of series of set kind of almost elements that form the structure of the podcast, and guests get to choose these beforehand. And so we'll start with what we call a fast friends question, which was created originally to kind of create connection between people as quickly as possible. And the question that Jose's picked first is, what do you value most in friendship? So tell us a bit about that.
Well, it got me thinking. Actually, I mean, the set of questions you sent me, Chris, were quite hard. I have to say, some of them make you think, but they're like the worst interview questions you can ever face.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
But in terms of friendship, I think my view of friendship has changed over the years. I have a 16-year-old son whose view of friendship is very, very distant to mine. I think my friendships. I don't know whether it's normal for somebody. I'm 51. I don't know whether it's normal my age, for someone my age to just have a very close group of friends and very few of them. So over the years, my friends have sort of the people who are called true friends have sort of dwindled. And
Right.
I don't think that's a reflection of my personality, but just
Let's hope not. No.
but just but just the fact that perhaps I'm more discerning when it comes
Yeah.
to friendship, and I think friendship for me is somebody, a friend is somebody who offers, who creates a space for you, who creates um, the opportunity for you to be yourself without having to second guess yourself or having to worry about what you're saying. Somebody who understands that you're coming from a position of not malice, whatever the opposite of malice is.
Yeah.
When you're
Yeah. Yeah.
coming from a position of, I'm here to talk, to be open. So that's for me important in friendship, and also the ability to be able to discuss things and agree and disagree agreeably, perhaps.
Yeah.
I listen a lot to podcasts from is it Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell. The rest
Yeah.
is politics. So, who they disagree agreeably, and I think we should be doing more of that all the time,
Yeah.
but particularly in a friendship. And finally, I think a friend to me is somebody whose instincts you trust, somebody who is not surprising you,
Yeah.
somebody who is predictable in a good way. So
Yeah.
you know that when you go to them, you know what you're going to get, and somebody who's able to tell you perhaps the things that friends who are more distant wouldn't tell you for fear of
Yeah.
offending
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Absolutely. And it makes me think, actually, although we probably wouldn't describe our relationships with our bosses as friendships,
Yeah.
a lot of the characteristics are the same, wanting
Yeah.
to be able to be yourself, wanting to
Yeah.
have a balance of challenge and
Yeah. Yeah.
support.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that is
And
interesting.
I think a great characteristic of a leader is somebody who allows for disagreement without demanding allegiance.
Right.
Sometimes you see that a lot. I mean, you see it in politics these days. Some of these wannabe tin pot dictators who demand total allegiance, or
Yeah.
else they destroy you. And you see elements of that in leadership as well. Sadly, again, we might come back to that later.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's I think it's important to be able to create a space to hear everybody's voices. Not least because when you hear everybody's voices, everybody's being heard. And if
Yeah.
everybody's being heard, there is an element of co-creation built into
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
process, isn't it?
And
So,
it's one of those kind of reciprocal things, isn't it? The idea that both people's benefit from that, they feel heard, but also you get a wider perspective, which can only lead to better decisions, surely.
absolutely. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
in my job as digital strategist, I go to schools, and very often, when I talk to the people, very often they refer to colleagues as laggards or radiators and drains. And
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a linguist, so I think language is amazing, are also
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
important, and particularly leadership language is really, really important. And sometimes the metaphors we use betray our intentions a little bit.
Okay, that's
And
interesting.
and and um, but but yeah, I think it's important to make sure that when we talk to colleagues, we listen to all voices.
Yeah.
There is a saying that I've read in a book somewhere. I'd love to be able to tell you who wrote that, but I've forgotten. I like pessimists because they're the ones who put lifeboats on ships.
Okay, yeah.
And I always,
Yeah.
and that's why I like to listen to everybody, even the laggards, even the
Yeah.
drains, because they're the ones who may have seen something I've missed.
Love that.
And then sometimes as a leader, there's nothing worse than believing that you have a good idea and then cherry picking all the good bits to push it
Yeah.
through and ignoring all the warnings that people were trying to tell you.
Yeah, all the red flags.
All the red flags.
Brilliant. Well, what a great start. Well, the next bit we'll move on to, and again, if you're new to the podcast, we have something called an ignition point, which we ask guests to kind of think back into their lives and to pick maybe events or people or experiences that, acted as an ignition point and caused some sort of transformation. And we started talking about this, but let's talk about kind of expand it a bit more. So the one you picked first is titled Switching from International Logistics to Teaching.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that. What even is international logistics?
So basically, I worked for a lorry company, a very well known lorry company. It was P&O.
Okay.
The ferry people. They used to have a ferry company called P&O Trans-European. Before that, I worked for another one called. I won't mention any more names, but
Sure.
I worked for another company who was running a careers, had a stand in the careers fair at university when I was finishing my degree, and I was completely sold by the management traineeship, and they made me feel like $1 million, and that
Really?
I was going to be exactly what the company needed, and I was going to get this, that, and the other when I joined the company, and
Right.
and needless to say, when I joined the company, none of those things happened.
Oh no!
So anyway, so I worked for them for a year and a bit. Was doing a crazy commute from Harrow to High Wycombe every day.
Wow.
And as it was against the traffic, so it wasn't that bad actually. But so I was very, very disappointed. That was my first encounter with leadership salesmanship,
Right.
which is something that I in my career I come across a lot. The people who sell you everything. They're very good at selling stuff and less good at delivering. But yeah, so I spent 4 years altogether working in international logistics, and it involved basically organizing the transport of the context I worked in was high-tech goods, so things that had to be delicate computer racks and things like that had to be delivered to awkward places, and we organized the whole thing. So it gave me a really, really good foundation on the logistics side of things. And to be honest with you, when I became deputy head, that came really useful because you need the same mindset to organize.
Organizing.
But then I realized that that's not what I wanted to do. What I really wanted to do is to teach. I've been inspired by some of the teachers I had in school when I was in Spain. I've already decided that English languages was the thing that I wanted to take further at university, and I enjoyed contact with young people and teaching stuff, and I just thought, I wanted to do this. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that when I left university because I couldn't afford to stay at university for a further year, sadly. So that's why I took on the logistics job. But then a few years later, the government, as I mentioned, offered a bursary for teachers, for languages teachers, which I accepted, and I went to Kingston University to do a PGCE. Which was great. And then I got my first job. My first job happened to be in the independent sector by complete coincidence. Nothing, I needed a job and they offered me one. And once you start in one of the sectors, you tend to stay. So my career has evolved and developed in the independent sector through, no particular conviction. It was just a job.
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. And again, I think the story of, moving into teaching or even deciding to be a teacher because of past teachers is so common, isn't it? And I think sometimes we forget that. I was talking to some skit trainees the other day, and I said, look, you're probably going to hear this 100 times. but please don't let it just wash over you that you are genuinely changing people's lives.
Yeah.
Like, if you teach for any amount of time, there's a very good chance that you'll bump into someone 10 years later and they'll say, I'm doing this because of you.
Yeah. And that has happened to me already. As I said, I'm 51. So I some of the first group of year 11s are now well into the 30s and married with children. And some of them have gone on to do language related jobs. And
Incredible.
And there is nothing better. Despite, teaching can be very rewarding, can also be quite frustrating, as you well know.
Absolutely.
The same with leadership. It can be really, really rewarding, but also quite frustrating. But there are moments where you think whether it was all worth it. When somebody comes to tell you, I'm doing this because you've made such an impact on me, it's just like, wow. It's
crazy. This is the first podcast episode since this happened, so I'll tell the story in this one, and I won't tell it again. But I recently just had a crazy experience last week. The other book that I've written, called Confident Leaders by Design, which is off the back of the doctorate, and it basically describes how you can be confident by design. But it's almost autobiographical in the sense that when I was at school, I was really underconfident. And that drove a lot of my decisions. And then I've subsequently become more confident and I've seen my life change. But I got in a lot of trouble at home with my wife because I didn't dedicate the book to her. I know, that's what most people say. In sharp intake of breath when they say, what? Because most people dedicate their books to their families. But when I thought about who I was going to dedicate the book to, I thought about who was it that helped me with my confidence. And there was one teacher called Mr. Money, who was my head of post-16, who effectively would not allow me to not do A-levels, would then not allow me to go to university, and pushed me into going to sort of Camp America. So when I think about the ignition points for me, this one individual was at the center of them. Well, anyway, the story, I got back in contact with a friend who knew him, and he said he'd love to meet me and could I go round to his house with a copy of the book.
Oh, wow.
So literally last week, I went round to see Mr. Money, who's now obviously, semi-retired, met him and his wife. Oh, I gave him the book. It was quite emotional. And I told myself going in, like, be prepared for this to be quite emotional, because to be able to look someone in the eye and say, I know you're telling me that you're proud of me and all the things I've done, the doctorate and the traveling and the teacher of the year and all that. I said, that's because of you. And so it was nice. But the bit that got me, I was kind of all together. And he's had a really tough time recently, kind of with some family illnesses. And he went out of the room to get a pen. And his wife, with tears in her eyes, said to me, you will not believe how much this means to him. And then I was starting to choke up and I was thinking, oh God, here we go. But that incredible kind of thing.
Having the person who pushes you and challenges you and supports you all at the same time at the right times is just priceless. Okay. Absolute priceless.
Well, let's keep moving on then. So we're going to go on to our first launch pad. And again, for those that aren't familiar, we get the guests to pick two images from the Leadership Launchpad books. And then I describe what I was thinking when I made it, but then we asked the guests to sort of say why it resonates with them. And so for those that are watching this on video, I'm just going to share my screen. So here we go. So the first one that Jose picked was called Great Leaders Amplify Others. And we've started to talk a little bit about this already, so it'll be fascinating to see where this came from. But the thing that I was thinking when I wrote this is a little bit awkward, embarrassing for me, because I don't think that throughout my career I've done enough of this. I think at times I've been quite self-centered, and not in a negative way, but I think the lack of confidence that I had meant that I wanted to be in the spotlight as much as possible to kind of validate myself, maybe. And so when I wrote this, it was almost a message to myself that I need to amplify other people. And the tagline says, looking and acting outwards helps to build trust, belonging, and commitment. And when I first thought about it, I thought, well, there's something around deliberately delegating. So not delegating because you've got too much on your plate or that you can't handle your to-do list, but genuinely putting people first. And so this idea that leaders must purposefully and gradually assign authority and ownership for tasks and projects, kind of acknowledging the risk and the need for that kind of distance support. And it got me thinking, some of the things that we need to do, I suppose, is to be careful when we're doing this, that we delegate authority, not just the tasks. So we're not just giving someone a task, but then basically managing it ourselves still. Like we talked about this idea of stretch and challenge, that we have to remove the roadblocks that are in the way. We have to kind of make peace with the fact that there is a bit of kind of risk in delegation, but also kind of encouraging that. And then when things do go wrong, just treating it as a learning experience. So the first thing, I suppose, to amplify would be to deliberately delegate. Another one that came to mind, and this was because of someone who does this, I watched them model this. They're constantly putting other people in the spotlight and amplifying the things they've said. You kind of see it in meetings, don't you, where people, they'll say, well, I really liked what Jane said, and they're almost just kind of acting as an amplifier, I suppose. But I started thinking about that and this idea that great leaders they redirect attention, placing staff in the spotlight, but also kind of actively welcoming, and we've talked about this, and amplifying any concerns that people have got, any ideas, or any potentially kind of new perspectives. So there was a few things around that, I guess as leaders, we need to model the vulnerability if we want other people to do that. I talk about this a lot with leaders about, I say to them, do you know your staff as well as you knew your students when you were teaching? Because of course we champion that, don't we? We say to teachers, if you really know your kids, then it will lead to better teaching. But I wonder whether that drops off when you become a leader, which is interesting. I was also thinking about this idea that, the best leaders connect people. They act as almost kind of, a hub where they say, oh, you need to speak to Sarah or go see John, or putting people together, which is interesting. And then the last thing I thought about was probably more foundational. And I tripped over this term a long time ago, I suppose, this idea of servant leadership, or having a mindset that once you become a leader, or you are a leader, you are there to serve the people that you kind of, you lead, and to almost put them ahead of yourself. So this idea of flipping the hierarchy and sharing the power, putting their needs ahead of yours, and then kind of helping them to develop. And I think that's fascinating, this idea that we are kind of, for people that have a servant mindset, they are kind of always empathetically listening. They definitely try to understand a situation before they put their own kind of spin on it. I've been reading about belonging cues, which is another story, but this idea that we are constantly, in the way that we behave or act or communicate, either in creating belonging or damaging belonging. This one on here talks about taking on the hard tasks. I don't know why it stuck in my mind, but this is a long time ago. I remember talking to a head of department who said, when I create the timetable, I make sure I take, the most difficult classes, or, whenever something comes up, I put myself forward for it. And so that was fascinating. But why did this one resonate with you?
Oh, well, a variety of things. I mean, you talked about how you came across the concept of servant mindset and so on. I came across the concept of multipliers a little while ago as well,
Okay.
which is similar to the great amplifiers, great leaders amplify and actors
Yeah.
amplifiers. And I think, I think I've come across the reason why this resonates with me. It takes me back to a conversation that I had with a head that I worked with, where I said to him, I've learned lots from you.
Right.
I really have. I've learned what to do, and I've also learned what not to do.
Yeah.
Recognizing that leaders are human, and
Yeah.
they behave sometimes erratically, and sometimes without the requisite self-awareness to be able to detect when you are not at your best,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
when you are demonstrating traits that are actually counter to the run counter to the benefit of the people around you and the school. This is in a school context, and I think ever since, I think one of the most reliable markers of mature leadership for me is this exactly: whether a
Right.
leader amplifies others or absorbs all the attention themselves. There's nothing worse than attending an open morning where the head is taking credit for all the good things
Yeah.
that he's been fed and other people around him has been feeding him, and without passing any of that limelight or acknowledging or recognizing the hard work of the people in his circle.
Yeah.
I say he because I have a he in mind.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
This can be a she, just as easily, sadly. And you mentioned earlier about how amplifying is deliberate, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's not about stepping back completely. I think is the deliberate bit comes from creating the visibility, the voice, the opportunity for people who would otherwise be drowned by the busyness and the
Yeah. Nice.
crazy
Yeah.
rhythms of schools, just to make sure that well, so and so has done a good job here. Go and talk to this person, go and do this thing, and this is your task now. In my blog, I've written a couple of times about a concept that I've come across in leadership, which is I call the octopus head,
Okay.
and it's very it's a whimsical concept that came to me
Sure.
one morning when I was, but I realized that one of the heads I worked with was like an octopus, in that the head controlled everything and the
Right.
tentacles were all off doing different things. None of the tentacles knew what the other tentacles were doing.
Right.
And as a result, very often we will tie knots. Us tentacles would just be
Yeah.
tying knots with each other because we were stepping on each other's toes, and
Yeah.
we didn't know what we were doing. Only the head, but of course, the head was trying to handle so much that the organization wasn't running smoothly, because
Right.
he became the bottleneck. He became the throttle.
Okay.
So we could only go as fast as he would allow. And that that was one of those moments in my career where I thought, okay, but this is something that I should not be doing.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And to be fair to him, I learned lots of good things from him as
Of
well. So,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's a question of, I suppose we all have to play to our strengths.
Yeah.
He felt that total control was his strength,
Okay.
and he didn't doubt in exercising it. So,
No.
but anyway, I don't want to
Yeah.
be. Sorry, this is quickly becoming a hatchet job.
Yeah.
It's not that. But the reason, going back to your question, why it resonated with me, is because as I've mentioned, this is a thing where in my blog I also talk about toxic leadership quite a bit,
Right.
and I don't talk about toxic leadership as something that happens to others. Toxic leadership is something we are all prone to
Yeah. Absolutely.
doing. So I'm not talking about another person.
No.
I've been in senior leadership for my own 15 years before I left, and I know that I've not always behaved and I've not always acted in a way that, looking back, I would be proud of all of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are reasons for that, and not excuses, but reasons
Sure.
for
Yeah.
that. And I'm earlier I talked about self-awareness, and I think one of the things that I try and do is to try and look at what I do from a different, step out of myself and look at myself and what I do and the impact my actions have on others from a different perspective.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. And one of I think the takeaways, I suppose, from that slide and what we just talked about for people that are listening is maybe go, find those quiet voices that are in your organization or your team that don't get amplified, and then give them a bit of a spotlight.
It's a leadership. Before we move on, it's a leadership responsibility. I believe that a good leader should find these voices and amplify them. It's not a nice. It's not nice to have. It's something that we should be doing as leaders. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, let's move on to your kind of, I guess, your second ignition point. So it says an unexpected professional crossroads. Tell us about that.
All right. Well, that was when I started my consultancy in April last year. Right. I was I don't mind saying this to folks. I've been trying for headship for 5 years, and it just wasn't happening. So I don't know. It must be my face. I don't know. It's. Or the fact that perhaps I'm not as good as I think I am. We mentioned that earlier. So there's a degree of self-awareness in this as well. But it wasn't happening. Headship wasn't happening for whatever reasons. I wasn't the right face for the schools I applied to, didn't have the right qualities, and that's fair enough. All the very capable people got the job. But it made me think: do I want to continue being a deputy headship until I retire, or do I want to do something else? There've been other factors in my life, some personal factors that I would, not going into. That were making that were beginning to have an effect in my role at school. Right. It was don't get me wrong, I was perfectly capable in doing my role, but it was beginning to feel that it was a little bit too much at the time. Yeah. And I think you had Andy Buck recently on the podcast. He talked. He was the first person that I heard the bus analogy from. Getting the right people on the bus, and off the bus and so on. And maybe we have time later to talk about metaphors and so on. And I think metaphors can be quite damaging actually to school. Yeah. But I found myself in a situation where I felt I was having the support of the people I was working with, and that wasn't necessarily always the case. And it turned out that, in the bus analogy, it's not so much that I was getting off the bus, but I was thrown under the bus. Right. Some of the behavior involved didn't shine because of the huge integrity in which they were conducted. So, right. So I found myself thinking, I need to do something about it. What do I do? And what I decided to do was to start a consultancy. So, right. So that's so it's a very, very personal reflection. It's an ignition point to something new. It's not something that I see as the end of something, but rather the beginning of something new. And to be honest with you, I'm absolutely loving it.
That's great.
I love it. I go to so many different schools, work with so many people, and it's just fantastic. The best thing about being deputy head is retained. The not knowing what lands on your desk every, sure. So that's good. I like that degree of unpredictability, and having to deal, and having to deal with stuff that that notion that your to-do list gets longer
Right.
rather than shorter at the end of one day, because you come across some other problems or some other
Yeah,
issues and so
yeah.
on. So that's retained. I like that challenge, but being able to spend more time with my family, with my children, with my partner, who's been an absolute rock to me
Yeah, nice.
throughout this time, and I think perhaps it's something I should have done before.
Yeah, but that's an interesting reflection, isn't it? And again, I think there'll be lots of people who are listening who might themselves describe their current place as a crossroads, that they
Yeah,
are,
yeah,
at a position where they've got some decisions to make. And
yeah,
the takeaway that I think is really strong from that, which you said, was, you know, not to see it necessarily as an end, but
yeah,
almost a transition point, and that it could be the start of something new, and it could be the start of something better. Um, but also, I mean, we're similar in age, but people that are at that stage of their careers who potentially,
mm,
and this is a personal thing for me, this idea of that, what do you want to spend the last part of it doing? Do you want it to be a slope, or do you want to give it another kind of boost, so
mm,
to speak? That's fascinating.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
Brilliant.
So,
Well, I'm just thinking, let's move on to the next launchpad,
mhm,
which is linked, I think, to what we talked about before, a bit about kind of the delegation side of things. So
mm,
this one that Jose picked is called "Provide a Compass, Not a GPS," and it
mm,
again was just, I guess, one of those takeaway phrases I'd heard somewhere, and thought, well, that's really interesting. That leaders probably need to, I guess, uh, provide guidance and direction, but maybe not slip into kind of prescription and exactness. And so, again, the analogy or the metaphor suggests that, of course, a GPS provides very precise directions,
yeah,
and often a kind of a fixed route, although, I'm sure they do alternative routes. But a compass, of course, gives us a more general direction, and provides more flexibility. And so I was just
mm,
thinking about, yeah, that's interesting for leaders to reflect when they do give guidance. At what level of kind of, I guess, exactness is it? And so when we think about what exactness reduces, we can think that it leaves not as much space for innovation. It certainly means it's more difficult to match something to a specific context. So when we think about, I guess, techniques or strategies that we find in research,
mm,
that's great. But if it's you know overly kind of precise, then that doesn't leave any room for us to make sure that it matches what we're doing. Of course, it reduces flexibility, potentially agency, and then obviously engagement. And then on the flip side, I suppose when we give guidance, you obviously do the opposite of that. But some of the benefits is that it can reduce the dependency. If 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 I have to go back to someone to get exactly what to do because I've got a sense that they want me to do it in a specific way, then that's not helpful. I think there's this level of psychological safety that comes with guidance. Certainly, there's a benefit to, I guess, some people might jump from exactness to almost, I don't know what it would be, negligence, or kind of
mm,
not giving anyone any guidance, like
mm,
go off and you'll work it out. I think for me personally, I don't like that complete autonomy. I want
mm.
some, I guess, flexibility within structure is what we say a lot of times.
That is key.
Um,
Absolutely, yeah.
you know and of course, the idea of giving people some autonomy or some freedom or some flexibility over how something can happen communicates a level of trust, because you're giving them some responsibility. And then the last one was kind of, this idea of reduces fear of failure. But why did this one resonate with you?
Oh, massively, because the whole notion of compass and maps is central to my whole concept of education. My company is called Azimuth
Right.
for that reason. So perhaps if I explain what an azimuth
Sure.
is
Yeah.
it's a it's an angle. If you hold the compass in your hand and you're trying to go somewhere, So the azimuth is the angle that determines a direction
Okay.
from a fixed point in the horizon to where you're trying to get to. And every so often you need to stop and recalibrate your azimuth to
Right.
make sure that you're heading in the right direction. So that's where the word azimuth comes from. And so I accept that, as a name for a company.
Yeah, I bet you were jumping around when you picked it when you thought
Yeah.
that.
But other than it begins with A, there's not much. There's not very memorable, and people struggle to say it. And even though it is an English word, it's an Arabic word in origin, but
Right.
it's commonly used in English. And I think the whole idea of familiarizing yourself with the terrain and having a clear direction rather than definite steps is really, really important. And I think it was Dylan William who said that when he was talking about formative assessment and feedback, that as teachers the best thing we can do is to tell people where they are, where they need to go, and how to get there. And so that was a notion of travel and direction that stayed with me throughout my career. And then I realized that it wasn't just teaching; it was also, when it came to leadership, it was the same idea. Providing sort of like a vision, a sense of direction, but also the autonomy for people to get to where they need to go. Following whatever route. That's not to say that there aren't any signposts that we can put on the way to point a shortcut. So we've done this before. That perhaps you might want to consider this, but always leaving room for interpretation, reflection, and discernment. So I think you mentioned it earlier. In leadership, we're tempted always to give precise instructions, aren't we? Because it feels reassuring to us. This is what you need to do. Do this, then that, then this. But of course, that language of programming, if this, then that, doesn't work so well. We're not machines. We need to make sure that we give people the time and the opportunity to make mistakes. You talked earlier about learning opportunities. To make mistakes within reason. Obviously, there are mistakes and mistakes.
Sure,
But and that's why a big element of the work I do with schools is developing leadership capacity. And I think that's what the compass model or the compass idea analogy help us generate, is that agency. For people to have the direction and the motivation and the tools and the competences to move by their own accord without always having to be pushed in a particular direction.
So. That's great. Yeah, that's a great thought in my mind. And some of the words you said then, kind of that azimuth thing, that opportunity to recalibrate, the idea of showing someone the goal, letting them get to where they want to get to, but also showing some of them possible shortcuts because of past learning is fascinating.
Exactly. It's not about leaving them on their own. It's about what we talked earlier about providing support at the right time.
Sweet spot. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm a firm believer that it's at the point of the highest challenge that you need to provide the highest support.
That's interesting.
So
wicked. Well, sadly, we come to the last part of the podcast, but it's going to be your kind of other fast friends question, which you chose was, what personal quality do you feel you need to develop the most? What's about that? It sounded like you had loads to choose from.
I found these things really, as I said to you, this is like the worst interview question ever, isn't it? It's like the weaknesses. What's your weakness? And I think, okay. So in my blog, I often talk about high latency and low latency leadership. Okay. So low latency leadership is the leader that has the quick answer, that talks really well, quite articulate, and you say something and they immediately come up with potential solutions and so on. And high latency leadership is the one that takes it a little bit more slowly, that creates the space for thinking, that mulls over the potential consequences of this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
And there are benefits for both. But in my experience, what tends to happen is that we often view low latency leadership as the qualities of a low latency leadership, the guy that can think on his feet.
Yeah.
The headmistress is always having ideas.
Yeah.
And talks very articulate about those ideas, whether they've been thought through or not. And then over time, I thought when I first started in leadership, I thought that those were good qualities to have, and I envied people who essentially ran their mouths in meetings. Stream of consciousness. And I thought, oh wow, they're so articulate and so on. But over time, I realized that sometimes these people weren't always the ones whose ideas had the greatest depth.
Right.
And it was the guy sitting quietly in the background, taking notes and being quiet, who would then occasionally just throw a little torpedo.
Nice.
Yeah. And I thought, actually, we talked about pessimists earlier, and I thought actually you have to have a balance. You have to have, right. You do have to have the jazz hands and the excitement, but you also have to have the discernment, the thoughtfulness, and the high latency required to mull over things.
I love that.
Look at consequences. Anyway, so for myself, it's that high latency that I would like to develop. That ability to restrain myself from saying whatever comes to my head. Not talk too much. I think as I age, I become better at listening and talking less. Particularly, I'm studying for an ILM7 coaching and mentoring.
Yeah.
And as I study coaching and the skills involved in becoming a good coach, I realize the importance of letting silence do the heavy lifting in a conversation. Not always having to step in with a pearl of wisdom or say anything, but just sit there quietly and let the thoughts happen and move on. And that's a quality that I aspire to have.
Nice.
So,
well, that's brilliant. And I mean, that high latency, low latency is going to go on to two of my lists. It's going to go on my list of things I need to improve because I am, again, sadly, low latency. But also it's going to go into, I get into the new Launchpad book 3. So I might have to chuck you, I'll chuck you a royalty for that one.
That's very kind of
the 10 pence that I make every time. But this has been an absolute joy. What a great kind of exploration of stuff. But so how can people connect with you and the work that you do?
So I am online. If you look me up, Jose Picardo, I'm on LinkedIn, for example, on Blue Sky. I think nominally on X. I try to be less and less on X these days because it's just not a nice place to be on, I'm afraid, recently. My website is azimuth.org.uk. Azimuth is spelled with a Z in the middle.
Nice.
Never a good idea if when you tell somebody the name of your company, you have to spell it. But oh well, I am where I am. So you can reach me through, find me various outlets online.
Perfect. Well, that's amazing. And again, if you're interested in all the Leadership Launchpad stuff, then get in contact with me either again on LinkedIn or via the website. So just to say thank you again. And for all those that listen, thank you. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.